So Bane versus the Juggernaut happened, or what we really know as Brock Lesnar versus Alistair Overeem. Um, so much happened in that show, and obviously we know how it ended, and we know what was said at the very end of the show. One thing that really shocked me though before that was John Fitch and Hendricks, and I honestly thought that Fitch would win. You know, the typical Fitch style of win, kind of grind out the decision, go straight to the ref, you know, the judge's decision, and he wins that way. And that's what I thought. Then I watched that interview with John Fitch. He was kind of surly a little bit, but you know that's how guys get when they cut weight. So I expected him to be a bit surly, but he seemed to have a bit of an attitude in that interview, and it was a bit, you know. And then the fight happens, and I'm thinking, right, 3-round fight, let's get ready. And then I go out of my room for a split second, and it was almost like that scene in Friends when Ross had the fight, and Chandler goes out to get something on the barbecue on the porch, and as he goes out, Joey goes, "Fight started," and then maybe 6 seconds later, "Fight's over," and that's pretty much what happened. And I thought, what did Fitch knock him out? Did Fitch knock him out? And to my surprise, Johnny Hendricks with that left, boof, straight to the face. Fitch just went down like that and was, you know, out a bit. And at first, when I saw that punch, I couldn't tell. It looked like to me, maybe I'm not the only one that thought it. I was like, where did that land? That looked like it hit him on his shoulder or something when we watched it. And then I was like, where? I didn't see that hit his chin. How did that happen? How did that happen? I did see his body just go like that. And then when they played it in slow motion, I did see that like it hit this bit here, or sorry, this bit around here, kind of around this side, and it hit him before it kind of, you know, the rest of his fist kind of grazed down towards this bit. But he hit him on the chin directly, and he went down, and he was out. And he went for one more, and then Mazzagatti just dives on the guy and, you know, breaks up the fight. I know some people might say bullshit, you know, quick early Mazzagatti. You know, Mazzagatti's always finishing fights too quickly, but I was stunned. I'd tell you that. I was really stunned. What that means for Hendricks, that's a hell of a, that's the coup of coups to have there in that weight class. You're the guy that finished John Fitch in 12 seconds. And for the UFC, that's another fighter now that they can market. That's the thing with the sport. Guys always come up and pull things out that you don't expect. And I guess for them, that means they've got some plans for Hendricks next year. Because if Hendricks can win one or two more fights, they can probably sell the guy on a possible #1 contenders fight, and you know, after the mess with Diaz and St. Pierre and Condit's all cleaned up, he could possibly be a guy that moves into the title picture at the end of the year, of next year, because you know no one has finished John Fitch in the UFC at least, and George St. Pierre didn't do that, and Hendricks did that in 12 seconds. So you know. It's kind of similar with Carlos Condit when he knocked out Dan Hardy, but you know, different. You know, it's actually kind of different. Anyway, as for Fitch, I wonder what they do with John Fitch next. I could see him fighting Dan Hardy if Dan, you know, is ready to fight him, but that would be a bad fight for Dan Hardy to have. I don't know who else. Matt Hughes could be the other name, but Matt might retire. Diego Sanchez, that would be a rematch. But who knows what's going to happen there, but that was an absolute shocker. I was completely stunned, because you never really associate John Fitch as a guy that's going to get finished. You always associate Fitch with a guy that's going to, you know, decision, grind the guy out. But to see Fitch get finished was actually surprising. Kind of sad to see Vladimir Machichenko lose the fight. I kind of like Machichenko. Can't say his name. Vlad, we'll call him Vlad. Kind of sad to see him lose. I remember him years ago when he fought Tito Ortiz. That was one of the early Zuffa shows that I think Machichenko was in, and he kind of seemed to be gaining some steam and some momentum. And then he fought Alexander Gustafsson, a Swedish fighter, and from what I understand, I think he flew over and trained with Phil Davis for some of his fights. So. And Dominic Cruz and those guys there at the Alliance. I think it's the Alliance Training Center. The fight that I was really excited for and surpassed my excitement for the entire show was the Diaz and Cerrone fight, the Nate Diaz and Cerrone fight. I've always enjoyed watching both of the Diaz brothers fight. They always bring it. They always come to fight. They always come to put on a show. Donald Cerrone is pretty similar in that respect. Guy that comes out to put on a show. And I also knew with the personalities involved, it would be something quite interesting to watch. Because we all know, if you followed the WEC and you followed Cerrone's career, he's not exactly shy. And, there was some back and forth between the two of them. The infamous Diaz whacking the cowboy hat off of Cerrone's head. And I actually thought this would be a pretty close back and forth fight. And Cerrone might edge him out slightly. And, Nate Diaz just showed up that night. He's boxing. He's got that effective boxing style. That boxing style similar to his brothers, where they kind of go for the body and the head quite a bit. And Cerrone was throwing some kicks, and it looked like they were starting to land. And then every time Cerrone seemed to kind of be getting comfortable, Diaz would just take over again in that boxing style of his. I thought Nate was going to take him down and just go for the submission right away, kind of like what we thought would happen with the Paul Daly and Nick Diaz fight, but didn't happen. But that's a strong win for Nate Diaz. I wouldn't say that puts him into title. Well, I think that puts him in the mix, as they like to say. The most overused term in all of UFC. He's in the mix. He's in the mix. Oh God, he's in the mix. But yeah, I think that is a fight that puts Nate in the mix now. Considering a lot of people were hyping Cerrone, and Cerrone had that strong performance in his last fight, so I think a lot of people, were expecting that if Cerrone were to win this fight, he was going to move into, the title contention picture. So maybe this moves Nate Diaz there. It's a hell of a role for him. He beat Gomi and then he beat Donald Cerrone. So who knows what's next for Nate? It looks like he's really starting to find his rhythm again at 155. Now, of course, the big heavyweight fight. And I wasn't surprised by the ending. And I'm not talking about who won. I'm talking about what was said at the very end. And I'll get onto that later. The actual heavyweight fight between Alistair Overeem and Brock Lesnar, I thought about it for a very long time. And I always, I base it on several different things. But one of the main factors was the guy with the most tools is the guy that's going to win. And we know what Alistair's striking is like. We know how great of a striker he is. We also know that he has some good submissions and actually has a pretty solid ground game from what we know. And he can hit a pretty nice guillotine, and he's got some good arm bars. And I've seen clips of him pulling off some nasty triangles on guys. So I was like, this is an interesting fight. We all know that Brock doesn't like to get hit. We've seen how he reacts when he gets hit. Brock does not want to make this a stand-up fight. Alistair hasn't faced a wrestler since 2003, and that was Chuck Liddell. He's, mainly faced strikers, so, what's going to happen? But I did think Alistair would beat him, and that was only if he could defend the takedown. And then my thing was, well, if Lesnar gets the takedown, he can kind of dictate where the fight goes, and if he can put him in that similar position he put Frank Mir in, he's going to pound Overeem into the, he's going to pound Overeem on the ground or just wear him out and tire him out and then eventually try and beat him there. So the fight starts, they're kind of feeling each other out. Lesnar goes for a single leg, which shocked me. I thought he would go for a double. Goes for a single. It's somewhat defended by Alistair. Alistair starts to go in for the kill. He kind of cut himself around the top of his eyebrow. And then Alistair starts firing. Goes for a shot around the midsection. Lesnar kind of goes back, then he hits another one, then Lesnar just goes down. That one really hurt him. And then Alistair started to, ground and pound. And Lesnar was just kind of like this. Not really defending himself, but not really doing anything to kind of get up. And he just got stopped right there and then, and I'm not surprised. And Alistair just put on, that was a very impressive performance by Alistair. He showed a good wrestling defense. I don't want to overuse the word great. He showed some wrestling defense, so it shows he's been, doing his homework and he's a student of the game. And of course, his striking is just as dangerous as ever. Sets up the Junior Dos Santos and Overeem fight very well now. And, I think he might beat Junior. given his striking experience, but this isn't a pure striking sport. This is MMA, and there are other factors to worry about. But I do favour Alistair slightly. That's a tough one to call. I mean, I'll probably have a better gauge on who I think could win that fight. But then the shock, or not so much of a shock, came at the end of that when Lesnar announced that he was going to retire from MMA. And that's the thing I want to touch on. Lesnar announcing that he's going to retire from MMA. Now, to me, I don't think he should retire from MMA. He's had too short of a career in MMA, in the UFC. There's still so much for him left to do. And what? Because he faces a tiny bit of adversity in the sport, he's going to, chuck it all in and retire? Is that the reason why? Because he lost the fight that, he feels the need to retire and, there's nothing left for him to do? Or is there more to that? I mean, maybe, when you've had 12 inches removed from your stomach, it kind of does something to you mentally and you kind of think, well, is this really worth it? And maybe, maybe that inactivity, that period where he had to have surgery and the diverticulitis and all of that, maybe that did affect him, and maybe that made him think, well, I don't have much time, maybe I should retire pretty soon, and he doesn't want to have to keep going through that. Then again, on the other hand, and this is an interesting point that my barber made to me yesterday, he said, as you can tell I've had a trim, he said to me, if Lesnar loses, I bet he retires. And I asked him why. And he said, and it's quite a logical point, if you look through Lesnar's career, he doesn't stick around for very long. And he's always used to people throwing out the red carpet and bending over backwards to sign him and to get him to join their organization or to work for him, work for them. If you go all the way back to when he was a college student or when he was a high school student and he was wrestling, he was recruited by Minnesota. He didn't go after them. He was heavily recruited, and all the universities were going after him to get him on their wrestling program. And, you hear stories about, the strategies people use to recruit someone. Then, as he was wrapping up his wrestling career, he was headhunted by the WWE and WCW and New Japan. And I believe there was even an offer from the early UFC back then, and he was able to use that to whack up his asking price. And for a guy who was on a developmental deal, he earned superstar money. He was on $250,000 per year, which is almost unheard of considering most developmental guys get 50 to 75,000 a year, and Brock was earning 250,000, which is, completely crazy. And I guess he was used to that, everyone bending over backwards to get him and throwing all kinds of money at him. And then when he was in the WWE, he was pushed right away to the moon. And granted, he was an awesome pro wrestler. He was a fantastic wrestler. But, they threw all this money and all this marketing into him. And, everyone was just, telling him how great he was. And then when it kind of got rough and the WWE went in another direction, in my opinion, and there were no immediate plans for him to be pushed back into, the main event picture, and it was rumored that he was going to be put in a program with The Undertaker and lose, Brock decided that he didn't want to be around anymore. But then again, there's more to it than that. But, for this point, that's what, that's the bit I'm focusing on. The point is, when it started to get rough and things were not going to go his way, he left again. And then he almost came back to wrestling. He almost came back to the WWE, but then when they were not going to give him the red carpet treatment, he decided he wasn't going to come back. And then in the UFC, it's almost like his UFC career mirrors his WWE career in a lot of ways. He comes in, makes an immediate impact, the red carpet is thrown, lots of money is thrown into the Lesnar project, lots of marketing and promotion is thrown into him, the Ultimate Fighter, lots of promotional videos, all of those things, wins a UFC title very early. The whole world knows who Lesnar is. He's now the biggest box office draw. He loses to Cain Velasquez, which, didn't surprise me. Is out for a year, was supposed to fight Junior Dos Santos, has surgery, comes back, faces Alistair Overeem and loses to Alistair Overeem, and now he wants to retire. And it's it's almost that not surprising to me, you know. And yeah, as my barber said, when can't say it right, but my barber did make this comment: when the going gets tough, no, when the going gets tough, the Brock gets going. And it's almost like, I think he had a point there. And really, does Lesnar really want to retire after, just facing a tiny bit of adversity after, losing to Alistair Overeem? Or is there more to that decision? Did he have this pre-planned for a very long time? And what happens next with Lesnar? Is this his exit strategy to go elsewhere? I know a lot of people are going to say, well, I think Brock's going to go to the WWE now. And that could happen. In his book, he never ruled that out, that he wouldn't go back. He never ruled that out, that, it's a possibility he would show up. But do I ever see Brock doing a full-time schedule with the WWE? Absolutely not. He's accustomed to being his own boss. He's accustomed to maybe having an 8-week training camp near to where he lives and, having 3 fights a year. He's not going to want to do a full-time schedule, and that's what they're going to want him on. They're going to demand Lesnar do 4 or 5 appearances a month on TV alone, and some house show appearances, and then the PR appearances. And WWE will not, say, oh, we want you on a part-time schedule. If they could work out a part-time schedule where he makes a quick appearance and then is out for a while, and then another appearance and then is out for a while, then I could see that happening. And Lesnar had made that comment that, well, I can go into the MMA at any time I want and leave and go back into the WWE or professional wrestling whenever I want. The WWE wrestlers can't go into any MMA anytime they want. So I wouldn't be surprised if Lesnar comes back. And I know some people are already saying, oh, Lesnar's going to show up on Monday Night Raw in 2 days, and I don't think that's going to happen. Anyways, I'm completely dried out. I'm sorry I haven't been able to do many videos. My voice practically went for shit for a week. I was without a voice for a while, and I've rambled on, and I've probably made my voice even worse. Just to wrap it up, 2011 was an incredible year if you were an MMA fan or a pro wrestling fan. I mean, so many things happened. I think MMA had the better year overall, if you want to compare it quickly. I mean, the beginning of the year, what a way to start. You had that great fight with Gray Maynard and Frankie Edgar. Then you had The Rock returning in pro wrestling, and everyone was abuzz about that. And then you had Strikeforce being bought out by the UFC. You had John Jones and the phenomenal year that he had, his real rise or ascension to the throne, beating Ryan Bader. Then 6 weeks later, beating beating Shogun Rua, beating Quentin Rampage Jackson, beating Lyoto Machida. The split between him and Rashad Evans, and Rashad leaving that camp. You had the rise of Junior Dos Santos in MMA. You had Alistair Overeem being the favourite to win the Strikeforce tournament, then getting fired or getting released from his Strikeforce deal, and then showing back up in the UFC and resigning with them. And then you have all these things that happened. You had the CM Punk promo where, that eventful thing, and it almost looked like there was going to be a change, and then all that momentum they gained evaporated when he showed up on Raw the next week after he claimed he was going, and then got completely lost in the shuffle, and it's just another guy. Anyways, I sound so drained. I feel so tired. Let me know what you think. What you thought of that UFC show. Who you think's going to win out of Overeem and Junior Dos Santos. What you think's going to happen with Brock Lesnar, and your thoughts on that. What you thought of the year in general. And before I go, I just want to say some shout outs to some of my guys. Mad Scientist, Mixed Martial Fartist, to Black, I can't even say his name properly, but there's one guy that always goes back and forth with me on my channel. I always go back and forth with him, and I always have fun talking to him. To all of my subscribers, thank you for sticking with me. And I'm not the most regular of people when it comes to making videos. I make a lot and then I disappear, then I make a lot, then I disappear. But I really appreciate for you all sticking around and kind of, watching what I do. And I can never say his name right, and I'll just say the guy from Bolton that does the pro wrestling videos, A.R. Marwar Dawson. I can't say it right, I'm really sorry. Out to him, out to Mad Scientist, out to Mixed Martial Artist, out to the Great Liger, out to Shooter Rooney, out to all those guys on Shooter Rooney's page who write on his wall, and we all go back and forth and watch those shoot interview clips. Out to all of you, Happy New Year, happy holidays, party hard, party safe, and I'll see you all in 2012. Take care.